Thank you very much, everyone, for coming here today to hear this talk from the Oxford Guild Society with the one and only Kanye West. You're the lucky 350 or so who've managed to get in out of a group of 5,000 plus students who balloted. So, well done getting in. We hope you're really excited for what we hope will be an incredibly inspiring event. Kanye's very kindly taken time out of his incredibly hectic schedule to come share some of his insights with us. We're very fortunate to have him here.
Kanye West is a multi-Grammy award-winning artist who really does not need an introduction.
So, without further ado, we present to you the man himself, Mr. Kanye West.
I thought that was aesthetically better. So I could just start with one question because I wanted to vibe off of an idea, to take an idea, and then I could riff off of that for, they said I have about 20 minutes to speak or so, and I might go longer. Can you hear me all the way in the back?
Yeah.
Alright, so anyone has a question, raise your hand. With the hat right there, you're the first one to raise your hand, that's all.
Yeah, I want you to talk about and reflect on your progression from the college dropout, from freshman adjustment actually, right? From freshman adjustment to Yeezus in your future works. I want you to talk about your aesthetic and how it's progressed.
Okay.
I want you to start with freshman adjustment as well.
Sweet.
Okay. So the key words that I heard there, and everyone please be completely quiet because I can literally hear a whisper and it'll like throw off my stream of consciousness, and the best thing is like when I can get a stream of consciousness going, it's like when people get the best, like illest quotes. And literally a whisper like can throw it off. So the two words that I vibed off right there was aesthetic and progression. And I was having a discussion with the designer that I want to use for my next season. That actually, I saw his work and I didn't even realize until I talked to him that he had studied with Helmut Lang. And I felt that type of energy through his work. Anyway, but I was discussing my background because a lot of people didn't realize that I had been in art school since age 5 and in art competitions since age 14. And I ended up going to college for a bit on an art scholarship, and I had a scholarship to 3 schools, the St. Xavier, the American Academy of Art, and the Art Institute of Chicago. And I went to the American Academy of Art because it was the biggest scholarship, and because my mother couldn't afford to, put me in any of those schools, and she was a professor at a school that I could have went to for something that she could afford, so she got a discount. Today was the first time that I realized that if I could do that again, that I would have went to the Art Institute over the American Academy of Art, that I would have researched where I could have got the best and the strongest education. And I'm sure this will end up online, so I don't want to diss any of the students that are currently at the American Academy of Art. I'm sure it's equal to the Art Institute of Chicago by now. But at the time that I was going, I would look around at the work in the class and that feel inspired. That feel inspired by the teachers. And I kind of, the idea of being a fine artist, that's a really difficult profession to get into, to be respected in, to make money at. And maybe the goal for some of the people were just to, work at advertising agency or to work at a record label or to, not truly end up, being Jeff Koons or something. My goal, if I was going to do art, fine art, would have been to have become Picasso. That was, or greater. And that always sounds like so funny to people. The idea of comparing yourself to someone in the past that had done so much, that in your life you're not allowed to even think you can do as much. That's a mentality that suppresses humanity. I talked to Ray Kurzweil the other day, and the conversation was quick, but he touched on the idea of thinking faster and reading faster, and I just thought it was super important to go meet with him. And I'm going to touch it to aesthetics, it will come to aesthetics. And the progression from me doing that first artwork to So Help Me God, artwork. So some of you here probably remember the night when the Donda tweets came through me, and I started talking about probably professions that you guys are going into in the future that seemed like they had nothing to do with a rapper. But what I was talking about was a band of thinkers that could remove religion, race, gender, and politics and somehow come together to find solutions for a broken planet. We have the resources as a civilization to find a utopia, but we're led by the most greedy, the least noble. And what I notice about creatives, and one of the reasons why I get into trouble, is not only did I want to design video games or make music or ride bikes, I think one of the most important things to my ability to create so much in the past 12, 13 years is my desire to play sports. And I approach creativity like a sport, where if I had a drawing, I would react just like a jock. Look at that fucking drawing right there, yeah! And I guess, of course we've been taught as for, people in this room that draw or, think on an aesthetic, that creative aesthetics, because we're all creatives here, we're all born artists. But some people are artists of business. Some people are artists of conversation. Some people, but particularly for the aesthetic-driven creatives, we were taught to, hide our black fingernail polish and put our head down in the back of the class and not be noticed out of fear that someone might laugh at one of our ideas, or that our idea could become a mockery or a failure in some way. There's a Bible saying, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." So recently I've been doing interviews, and I had to go back to this verse because I don't think there's a living celebrity with more weapons formed against them. But I also don't think there's one more prosperous. So what weapons have prospered? the smoke and mirror of opinions. You know, I was sitting with Steve McQueen because he shot the visuals for All Day 2 days ago. And that's completely different than the Brit Awards. And I told him, this, so it doesn't get taken out of context, I'm going to use the word like. I'm not saying it is. I'm using it as a comparison for people who want to say, Kanye goes to Oxford and tells everyone that this, what I'm about to say. And I'm not telling you this. I'm telling you what I told Steve McQueen in private. But what I said was, the Matrix is like the Bible of the post-information age. I compared it like when the 100 guys, the 1,000 guys, you know, come at Neo. Like those are opinions. That's perception. That's tradition. Attacking you from every which angle possible. But if you have a focused why, and you have master senseis like Lawrence Fishburne, and you have a squad behind you, you literally can put the world in slow motion. Like if Michael Jordan talks about the rim, you know, being wired. And it's felt to me, you know, firsthand experience, you know, it's still February, correct? This is March. I can't say this statement anymore, but for the first 2 months, me and my team would like look at each other and say, by the way, I don't know days of the week, so I don't go by days of the week. I just go to exactly when my appointment is. We would just look at each other and say, it's still February. For the sheer amount of work that we were able to put into the world. Some of the stuff had been worked on for years coming, months coming, but nonetheless, they just came back to back to back to back to back, answering every crazy interview question, slam dunking, blocking every shot, catching every rebound. And aside from the right that I don't have to give my opinion publicly about artists, I probably would have been that in 2000. I know that's incorrect also. You know, this humanity that I talk about, this civilization that I talk about, this future utopia idea that I talk about, can only happen through collaboration. One of the things that I loved about Elon Musk, and I kind of, you know, and I love Steve Jobs, you know, that's like my favorite person, but there's one thing that disappointed me. It was when Steve passed, he didn't get the ideas up. That was kind of selfish. And you know that Elon was like, yo, take these ideas, because maybe there's some companies outside of Apple that could work on them and push humanity forward. Maybe the stockbrokers won't like that, you know, the stockholders wouldn't like the idea of Steve giving his ideas out. But, you know, ideas are free. And you can't be selfish with it. And I think that that's been a progression of mine with the advent of a human being named Drake. You know, this idea of holding on to a #1 spot, and then you get this guy that comes and blows out the water every #1 of any band ever, be it me or Paul McCartney. And at that point, that concept, you can leave the mountaintop finally and walk down and readjust and see what your position on earth can be. And I've had all of these mixed emotion, mixed feelings based off of, bigotries, walls, perceptions that I've had to deal with. Ones that drove me to titles like Black Skinhead or I Am a God. Now I understand that I'm a servant, and with my voice and with the information and my ability to build relationships with amazing people or speak to amazing people or call Elon Musk out of the blue or call Obama out of the blue. He calls the home phone, by the way. With that, I have a responsibility to serve. Why do I say the Matrix is like the Bible? And what is my definition of the Matrix? I work with this artist named Vanessa B. Croft, and she, before our presentation in New York, the Adidas collaboration, she bought my daughter some toys. And it would be interesting because I would see toys that, people would buy my daughter, and I would say, this toy isn't quality. I don't want my daughter playing with this. And it could seem somehow elitist or something like that. I was like, no, it's not enough love put into this. This is just manufactured, with the will to sell, but not the will to give an inspiration. So Vanessa is very irreverent and very focused. She's like my eye. She's a piece of my brain. And she bought my daughter these 3 wolves, knowing that the whole collection would play the song of wolves and be based on this concept. And when my daughter saw these wolves, I had never seen her happier. She was going so crazy. She was grabbing one, she was riding on top of one, she was just running around. I've never seen her happier than this moment. And that level of happiness seems to be the thing that we're fighting for every day, that we're trying to buy back, that we're trying to work for, that we're trying to hope that, especially in America. America, people really do wear like $3,000 shirts, it's for real. Like out here in Stockholm, the people are just like, come on, dude, that's like a $3,000 shirt. I'm assuming that I probably have a $2,000. I got it for free from the designer. But that joy, that idea of joy, what makes you happy? What makes you happy inside? We've been sold a concept of joy constantly, through advertising, through car advertisement, through, fashion branding. It's not the concept of time, time with your family, time with your friends, the little time that we do have on earth, the existence of the human race and what we do with that. It somehow was sold to us through a Gucci bag or something. I have something I say all the time, I'm going to say it again. Time, in my opinion, time is the only luxury. It's the only thing you can't get back. If you lose your luggage, I'm not going to say the obvious name of luggage that I would normally say because I actually have a meeting with them soon. So. But if you lose your expensive luggage at the airport, you can get that back. You can't get the time back. And everyone knows that when you're younger, time moves way slower. Summers take so much longer. Class takes so much longer. It feels like people do everything in life, I'm gonna speak from an American perspective, to get this like BMW or this Benz, to you get this townhome, you get 2.5 kids exactly. One of them has to be small, you know. And you're looking for this moment where you sit in your BMW after all the work that you've done and all the accolades that you got and all the, you know, how big your house is and everything. And somehow you think you're going to get that level of joy, you know, that my daughter had when she received those wolves. And as you're sitting in traffic in your BMW, it's something that, you know, feels empty to everyone who reaches that point. You know, this concept of the selfish human, this idea of separation by race or gender or religion or age or my favorite thing to hate, class. People say a village, it takes a village to raise a child. People ask me, you know, how my daughter is doing. She's only doing good if your daughter's doing good. We're all one family. Like literally, last names aside, we're all one family. And we have the ability to approach our race like ants, or we have the ability to approach our race like crabs. And it's so many ideas that create division. There's certain things that have been beat in a way, some way, race, whatever. You know, this is a generation that is far less racist. It's only very, you know, we have small remnants of even thinking of calling someone separately a racial slur. Like white people that listen to rap say it in the privacy of their own home. So that idea, you know, it's past. It's an older idea. We've had the Cosby Show, Obama's president, you know, like Beyonce's great, you know. That's past. But there's still something that you're being taught every day, and especially in the UK. And that's a division by class. Our main focus, in my opinion, and since I have the right to say this in front of you guys, to give an opinion, you know, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, just send it right back. Our main focus, or picture a world, imagine a world, let's remove war first of all. Imagine a world with no war. And imagine if everyone's main focus, more so than how they look going to the club, more so than how much money they make, more so than how good they get on, you know, their main focus was to help someone else. You know, I was joking with the interviewer, you know, earlier today that people talk about, you know, the amount of viewers that the Brits get or the amount of viewers that the Grammys get. And I said they need to do award shows for the Nobel Peace Prize, but I guess that doesn't sell as many MasterCard commercials. Why did I mention a brand? I had two things. I'm trying to like get a flawless victory on my speech. I've already had two demerits already, two missed free throws. No offense to MasterCard. But that was a big fucking logo right in the middle. you guys are being taught, without you knowing it, ways to separate yourselves from each other. If you're separated, you can be easily controlled. If you're too busy pointing fingers at each other as opposed to holding hands, you can't get anything done. You know, Chris Rock called my album My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Chris Rock and everybody else in every single media publication called My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy the best album of the past 25 years. This only came through collaboration. One of the most memorable things about My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy was Nicki Minaj and the fact that she kicked my ass on my song, on one of the best albums, the best album. I'm just saying what the critics said. Of the past 25 years. That in that the best album of the past 25 years that I spent a year and a half making after I was exiled from my country. It was a personal exile, but exiled from my country to come back and deliver the magnum opus of a work and to be outshined, to be beat by a girl, basically. This was necessary. I think it was one of the most important points of working on that album, was to not stop her from her moment because of how good she did. So, just to give a comparison but not a complaint, if you think about why did it take so long for the new Yeezys to come out, why did I have to leave, you know, one group and go to the other group? Why did that group not want to speak to me? I think that the Yeezys I was doing over there were comparable to that Nicki Minaj verse, because these guys would work 3 years on a project. We're gonna bring out this shoe, and we're gonna ramp it up by the Olympics, and we're gonna put it on this celebrity and this, and then the head's son would come and say, my favorite shoe is the Yeezy. And I can't hear about these Yeezys anymore. Like everybody's like, my favorite verse is Nicki. I can't hear about this verse anymore. But because, I'm not saying just because it was gonna work for her anyway. But let's just say that in some way it helped give her some exposure. She was able to go on and become as successful and fly and run and dream and provide. And it was not blocked because of my ego. You know, one of my biggest problems, one of my biggest Achilles heel has been my ego. And if I, Kanye West, third person, can remove my ego, I think there's hope for everyone. When I talk about collaboration in the creative process, the best idea wins. I studied the way Steve Jobs approached Pixar, the way Steve Jobs approached Apple, the way Disney approached Disney with the animators, because you get these creative animators that come in and this idea, I got this idea, we get offended, we do this and that, and if people have seen, like, I'm proud of the consistency of the performances that I've done since I've been out here. And it comes from 4 would-be egomaniacs being forced to work together. The best lighting guy on the planet, the best staging guy, the best video director guy, another staging guy, a guy with a laptop for no reason. Just because all I was like, what are you doing? Laptops for no reason. To just deliver back to back to back extremely successful, inspiring, groundbreaking, visual, visceral, creative moments that otherwise would have been challenged. And the kid from Chicago screaming in interviews and screaming from the top of the stage for 40 minutes in a row had to pull that card out a few times. Not particularly screaming, but remember, I will scream. My mama taught me if I was in a grocery store in an aisle by myself and a stranger grabbed my hand, scream at the top of your fucking lungs. So when I'm at a award show, a stranger grabs my hand and says, okay, so we're going to use these moving lights, or we're going to go play the music right now before we define the look, or we're going to just keep the cameras cutting in a traditional TV way. I'll scream at the top of my fucking lungs. People say I have a bad reputation. I think I got the best reputation in the building. Because they want you to have the reputation of tucking your black nail polish into your pockets and sitting in the corner of the class and not fighting for your ideas out of fear of being ridiculed. Someone not liking your thoughts, being embarrassed, being talked about, the next day, not being accepted, being an outsider, being crazy. That's another one of my favorite ones, to be called crazy. I'm nowhere near as smart as either of my parents. They were both educators, both had PhDs. So I almost feel embarrassed when I speak in comparison to my mom was head of the English department. My dad is an incredible, orator and a humanitarian. Just 5 years ago, he stayed at a homeless shelter to help. He worked on the idea of good water and created these water distillers in somewhere between Maryland and Delaware. I'm forgetting the exact location. And he put together this good water distiller cafe where kids could also read poems, bands could play, people could come and just read, get on the internet, and have everything driven by clean water. I remember calling him when he was busy nailing the planks of wood together himself. I had given him some money to work on the idea. I remember when I was young and I saw my dad working on computers. This is before Steve Jobs. Like, everybody just felt they could start a computer company. Like, my dad could start a computer company. And I remember the guy that he was working with ended up being a bad guy and not knowing what he's doing, and just being like borderline like a scam idea. Like, computers are gonna be the next thing. Let's start our own computer company. And the guys that helped him, that he had the voice to find, that he looked at whatever the version of Craigslist was back then, to find, didn't have the same motivation, didn't have a high enough skill set to match up to his vision, to his dream, for it to be considered to be a success. But the success is that his successor will be successful in his lifetime. And you can say, oh, well, you are successful. I'm successful in learning about the beauty that is afforded rich people. But in learning that, growing up middle class, it's something that's beating out of my chest that screams out, wait a second, I was middle class and I didn't get to see none of this shit. So let's have an NBC telethon moment and say that beauty has been stolen from the people and sold back to them under the concept of luxury. It's not illegal to not listen to music. It's illegal to not wear clothes and also possibly extremely cold. So that means that someone is proposing an idea on you that you legally have to do. Clothing should be like food. There should never be a $5,000 sweater. You know what should cost $5,000? A car should be $5,000. And you know who should work on a car? The people who work on the $500,000 cars. All the best talent in the world needs to work for the people. And I am so fucking serious about this concept that I will stand in front of anyone and fight for it. Because I was 14 and middle class. I know what it felt like to not be able to have. So if people say to me, but you're successful, what are you crying about? I'm crying about the people. I'm crying about their daughters, our daughters.
As one family. What good is it? What good is anything that everyone can't have?
Every ism, they think that we're done with racism. What about elitism? What about separatism? What about classism? That's all.